My grandfather only had one rule when I was growing up in Puerto Rico: never go into the woods after sundown. He said it all the time, but he never explained why. I always assumed it was just one of those old superstitions people pass down. It wasn't until I was about 14 that I realized he meant it seriously. I grew up in Fajardo, on the eastern side of the island. Most people think of beaches and boats when they hear that name, but if you actually live there, you know there's more than just the ocean. Right behind the neighborhoods, the land turns into thick forest. The woods start just past the last row of houses, and once you're inside, the trees close in fast. When the sun goes down, it gets dark in a way that's hard to explain unless you've seen it yourself. I lived with my dad, but my grandparents were right next door, so I spent a lot of time with them. My grandfather was around almost every day. He wasn't the type to believe in anything supernatural. He was a big man, even in his old age, the kind of person who looked like he'd worked hard his entire life. He had served in the army, lived in New York for years, ran a business. He was practical, which is why that rule always felt out of place. Every evening he'd sit out on the balcony in this old hospital chair he used for his legs, just watching the street. And at some point, almost like a routine, he'd say it again: don't go into the woods after sundown. No explanation, ever. One evening when I was about 14, a friend of mine came over. The sun was already starting to set, the sky turning that deep orange color that means night is close. He asked if we could go explore, and he meant the woods. Normally, I would have asked my grandfather first, but I already knew what he'd say. So I didn't bother. I just told him we were going for a walk. As we were heading out through the gate, my grandfather called out from the balcony, "Don't go into the woods after sundown." It caught me off guard. I hadn't said anything about where we were going. For a second, I wondered if he somehow knew, but I just laughed it off and told him we wouldn't. Then we went anyway. At first, everything felt normal. We followed one of the usual trails. The coqui frogs were loud, the trees moving slightly in the breeze. It felt like any other time we'd been out there. But as the light faded, things started to change. The path got harder to see. The sounds of the forest slowly died down until it felt quieter than it should have been. After a while, my friend said he needed to take a leak, so he stepped off the trail and disappeared a little deeper into the trees. I waited. A minute passed, then another, then a few more. Something about the woods suddenly felt off, too quiet, so I stepped off the trail to go find him. Instead, I walked straight into a clearing. At first, I thought I recognized it. There had been a small clearing in the woods where someone once threw a party years before. I remembered music, people, a fire pit, but this wasn't the same place. This clearing was much bigger. The trees formed a wide circle around me, farther out than I remembered. It didn't feel familiar at all, and standing in the middle of it was someone. At first, I thought it was my friend, so I called his name. No answer. I stepped a little closer. That's when the figure turned around, and I knew right away it wasn't him. It was an old woman. From a distance, she had looked taller, but up close, she seemed small, almost fragile. Her hair was completely white, hanging loosely around her face, but her expression was what stood out. She looked angry, not normal anger, something deeper. Something that didn't feel right. We just stood there, staring at each other. The woods had gone completely silent. No frogs, no wind, nothing. Then she raised her hands. The movement felt wrong, too quick, too sharp for someone her age. Like her body didn't match the way she was moving. She started murmuring something under her breath. I couldn't make out a single word. Then the temperature dropped. Not slowly, it just changed. The air felt cold in my chest when I breathed in. At the same time, the wind picked up out of nowhere. The trees around the clearing started moving, but it didn't feel like normal wind. It felt focused, like it was only happening right there. She kept moving her hands, faster now, still whispering, and I realized I couldn't move. Fear just took over. I shut my eyes and waited for something to happen. I don't even know how long I stood there. But suddenly, everything stopped. The wind died. The cold disappeared. The sounds of the forest slowly came back. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was empty. She was gone. It took almost an hour before my friend and I found each other again. He swore he never left the spot where he stepped off the trail. He said 1 second I was there and the next I was just gone. We got out of the woods as fast as we could. The whole time, it felt like something was watching us from between the trees. But the second we stepped back under the streetlights, that feeling disappeared. When I got home, my grandfather was still sitting on the balcony. At first, he looked annoyed that I'd stayed out so late. But the moment he saw my face, that changed. "You're pale. What happened?" he asked. So I told him everything. When I finished, he slowly turned and looked toward the houses, toward the woods behind them. And for the first time in my life, he looked scared. After a moment, he said one word: brujas, witches. He immediately went inside and started shutting all the windows. Then he locked every door. That wasn't normal for him, not like that. Before I left, I looked back inside. He was sitting alone in the living room, praying. After that night, he never repeated the rule again. He didn't need to, because now I understood. Some places aren't the same after dark, and whatever I saw that night is the reason I will never go into the woods after sundown again.